What I want to talk about today is what I see as a massive opportunity to grow the Bitcoin mining network, decentralize it, and to the president's comments earlier, to kind of foster innovation and um, entrepreneurship. You know, here and really anywhere, but especially places like your coldish plants. So this talk is for facilities managers and it's for capital planners and it's for engineering designers and consultants, HVAC folks or sustainability professionals, either in the consulting world or as part of administrations, people looking after, say, decarbonization strategies. And it's for Bitcoin miners, the small to medium Bitcoin miners. Uh, the people in that scrappy 1 to 5 megawatt space, like kind of the perfect spot. So I spent, the better part of the last 12 years working with clients in the first categories there in all kinds of different industries, um, airports and rail and large commercial office and um, universities, really any sort of large institution, and even the, say, pension funds that own these kinds of assets that are looking to decarbonize. And most of most of the focus of the work was electrifying heating systems, because that's a massive part of scope 1 emissions. So maybe for the last 6 years or so, I've been tabling the idea of heating with Bitcoin miners, to at least select clients who I thought wouldn't kick me out of the room. And it's kind of interesting. The feedback was not all bad. It was people are interested, but it's still very early, and it's the bigger you go, the sort of more apprehensive people are to take risks. They don't want to be early adopters, first movers, if they're going to be dropping tens of millions of dollars on new systems or you know whole entire strategies. Um, and so I kind of wanted to just break down what I see as the heating market, for anyone interested in this, who, as an entrepreneur or as, one of the roles that was up there earlier. Um, just from a, macro perspective, the global market for heat is massive. If you were going to serve all of it, which isn't really practical, but that would be, for context, um, like a 6.5 million megawatt Bitcoin mine, right? Just to serve all that. So this graph kind of breaks down the quantity of systems versus kind of their size. So right, you got the smaller systems on the left, but there's a lot more of them, and the big systems on the right, but there's not very many of them. And that's how they're kind of distributed. This is log just to fit it all in one space. Um, the two first chunks there, the yellow ones, I'm not going to get into those too much. Um, right now, those are sort of under a megawatt. Those are the home applications, the pools, and even single buildings and whatever. Um, and I'm not really going to touch on that last chunk either. That's the biggest section. That's um, sort of over 50 megawatts, because once you get up to that range, usually the solution is going to be something more like CHP, combined heat and power. It's going to make more sense to just produce your own power and then get the waste heat, which means there isn't really room for Bitcoin mining waste heat. But a big part of that is just the competition for electrons now. It's pretty fierce, and you're not rocking up and getting 50 to 100 megawatt um, PPAs too easily these days, depending on where you are. So the focus here is kind of those two blue chunks in the kind of 1 to 10 to up to 50, but um, single digits and low double digits, mainly. The value proposition for the miners in this case, whatever size, is like fairly straightforward and probably pretty obvious to the room. Besides, serving to decentralize the network, you are reducing your net operating costs because you're, earning a revenue stream, and that revenue stream is a new revenue stream, and it's uncorrelated to hash price, which is nice for, um, financials. It's a totally new growth market. It has the ability to reduce your non-miner capex. So by that I mean there's already walls and a roof and electrical infrastructure serving somewhere that needs heat, and so you're just rolling up with miners. And mostly what I'm talking about in this is hydro cooled. There are some opportunities for air cooled, but it's few and far between, and it's also much more seasonal, much harder to find a heat off taker in the summer. Um, you can also reduce your deployment time. Like if you're not building the rest of the infrastructure, it's fairly quick. You can maybe have a mine up and running in 3 months or something. Um, Kind of reducing political risk for yourself and the whole industry as well, because you're embedding yourself in existing industries that are serving a purpose, right? And you're not so easily kicked out when you're providing that you know clear and obvious traditional benefits. So through the changes of government and administrations, the attitude can change toward Bitcoin mining. We've seen it. There's still places that have a moratorium on it. So this is a nice way to sort of um, play good citizen and just make it a whole lot harder to boot you out. Um, and generally just improves the public narrative around Bitcoin mining, which is not very sophisticated, I would say, and not always very good. Um, but so more importantly, in this space, I think um, things like Bitcoin mining, decentralization are not selling features for people buying heat, right? They're looking for heat. They don't necessarily care about the things that you may care about, but what they do care about is especially if it's a heating as a service model, which is essentially um, a no capex version. You're just straight up selling heat, you're selling joules, and people are paying for that and nothing more. And it's a pretty common industry. It's like um, combined with cooling, it's almost 100 billion. So it's something like half of that. It's massive, massive globally. Um, so you're giving someone an option to have off balance sheet financing of heating equipment, so they're not paying the capex up front for new boilers or whatever. You're possibly ideally reducing their opex too, which is a bonus through the Bitcoin subsidy. Um, you're helping them make the case for electrification. A lot of these groups that I mentioned are trying to electrify their heating systems for a whole number of reasons, but it's generally speaking the trend and accelerating going forward. Um, so you're reducing emissions. It's easily integrated with their systems. You can put it indoors, outdoors, whatever. You probably know most of this stuff. Um, and then, you can also give them the option of playing demand response markets too, even on a smaller scale, as long as you can. Depends on the market, but if you can get to a certain class, you can certainly get paid for that for shutting down. Um, and you don't need standby gensets and fiber optic um, the way that data centers do. And data centers are trying to, they're doing their best to encroach on this market too, but I don't think they're very well suited for it. Most of the technology, most of the competition you're up against um, is, the incumbent fuels, whatever's being used, typically hydrocarbons, and the challenge there is um, beating that price in North America. There aren't a lot of places where hydrocarbons are cheaper than electricity, um, but there are some. The more remote areas, bulk fuels can be more expensive, and then other jurisdictions, other places outside North America, Europe, for example, that can happen. You're up against electric boilers, electrode boilers, but they are typically just used for peaking, and that's not really what you want to serve with Bitcoin mining. Um, and then you got the different flavors of heat pumps, and sometimes those are appropriate, but a lot of times they just don't make sense either due to the climate or due to the cost. They can be tremendously expensive, or you can't use them, that you can't implement them easily as a retrofit. Ground source, for example, ground source is becoming, fairly popular for newer stuff, but these are massive, really expensive systems. Um, the system in that inset picture is a water source heat pump, which is, I would say, the best. That's the toughest thing to compete against. It's just, super efficient. But you need a source of water. So you need a, relatively warm source of water, a river, lake, whatever to pull your heat from. And these things are also pretty expensive. So if you are not in the business of capital deployment, which, some of these are, and they don't really care about the CapEx, but not everybody can afford, tens of millions of dollars and wait years for a system like this. I mean, if you look at the scale, there's a couple of people highlighted in a little star there just for scale. Like these are massive systems, not only something like 35 megawatts or something. You could certainly come up with a more compact solution with hydro cooled miners kicking out 35 megawatts than that, faster and cheaper. Um, And then, yeah, CHP kind of takes over that upper end of the scale, and then data center waste heat. There's a lot of activity in that, and I would say that it's basically, they're trying to find a solution for waste heat that they've got anyway. They're there, they might as well try to use it, and sentiment is changing around even data centers, all the flavors of them, because they are just sucking up power like crazy. Um, but they're basically no competition. They don't do most of the stuff that you can do with Bitcoin mine. For the most part, they're still air cooled, so they're lower grade heat than, say, a hydro cooled miner, and high entropy. So try to scavenge useful heat out of the air is not easy. It's not practical, and that's why it's not really done very often. Um, and with Bitcoin mining, they're compact. You can build them right on site. You can't do that with a data center. You can size them for the heat load, which is not something you do with a data center. Um, Build them quickly. They're interruptible, low security, all these good things. Um, good to keep in mind as people talk about it, because it comes up a lot. Um, So constraints and challenges to think about if you're, wanting to evaluate a potential opportunity. The temperature range compared to what the outlet temperature is of your miners, but they're getting pretty high and pretty useful heat. So even if it is, even if you are trying to boil water, you can certainly like take it 80% of the way there. And that's not bad. You can displace a lot of fuel that way. What's the cooling method you're going to use? Hydro. The energy profiles of, this potential heat off taker, are they, you know, do they have a 247 365 load? Like on a hot afternoon in July, how much heat are they using? That's kind of what you want to size for, ideally. Um, and then grid emissions factors, if the off taker is trying to electrify to reduce their emissions, that doesn't really work if it's dirty grid. Um, and then I think, it's such a great solution that the biggest challenge I think out there is the negative perception. There's all kinds of biases against it, ideological biases, not very well founded, but it's exhausting to try to orange pill, every single person you talk to and explain the value of sound money and on and on and on, right? So, but that's kind of the game. Um, so some of the good opportunities, I think, one of the most ideal ones is district heating systems, massively popular in Scandinavia and in Europe and further east. I mean, combined, there are tens of thousands of these systems. Um, Over there in North America, not as many, just because we're younger and energy is cheaper and a bunch of reasons, but they're becoming more popular. And you'd be surprised. I mean, there's at least 800 um, between US and Canada that I know of, and I'm sure there's well over 1,000. They just don't, talk about them. It's underground infrastructure, not super sexy. Um, but they're ideal because they have a large base load. They also need heat in the summertime. Um, most of them are trying to electrify, so most of them are burning something to produce the heat, and they're trying to figure out over the next couple of decades how they can electrify. So, that previous heat pump you saw, that's a system in Boston that they're putting in. Um, so most of them have a decarbonization strategy, either that they've implemented themselves or because um, their pension fund or whatever, whoever their owner is, has pretty strict decarbonization strategy. Um, and This picture is a one of Mars facilities in Finland. This is a couple of megawatts. I'm not sure which one this is. Can't remember. But they're not gargantuan, and it's kind of a nice size. Like, this is not actually the size of mine that the pubcos want to be developing, right? This is the kind of perfect size for smaller miners and entrepreneurs to be building. Um, Yeah, so quickly, like, here's what we've got in North America. Um, it's quite a bit. It's quite surprising. Basically, um, you know, every military base, hospital, airport, college, and lots of municipalities have these systems, um, of various sizes. Tried to break them down here a little bit. You can see by scale in the 0 to 10 megawatt range. That's where most of them are. And by sort of total aggregated megawatts, you still got over 500 you could serve. So it's an interesting market. Um, this is kind of the breakdown of where they all are. Mostly colleges, municipalities, healthcare, and then here they are aggregating all the power. So kind of the same categories, except military has a ton. Um, And then outside of that, there are industries that use heat round the clock too. If there are 3-shift bottling plants, for example, they use tons and tons of heat, washing out the bottle, doing certain processes like things you have to do with milk to pasteurize it, etc. There's all kinds of stuff. Green hydrogen production is starting to happen, and that's also an ideal application, because they have to do everything all electric just to be green. Um, and that's a picture of the Anheuser-Busch plant on the way up here, just off of, what was it called? I-25 maybe? Um, that's the kind of place that uses heat, a lot of it, around the clock. That kind of opportunity exists all over the place. Um, yeah, so I just wanted to leave that with you. This is kind of things I've been thinking about for the last number of years, distilled in one place. And, if you think that decentralizing Bitcoin mining is important, um, and this is something that you'd like to pursue. You don't have to be working in Bitcoin. You don't have to be working for a Bitcoin mining company to support it. You can take action from all kinds of different angles, and I think this is one uh, great space that is just beginning. And that's all I got for you. If we got time for the next one, we could just do Q&A or something. Yeah.
I never bring lab that me. The ability to go back to buying cold water, it the pit, hydro pool, it hydro.
Advantages or drawbacks? Well,
As example, he is
yeah, so heating as a service, when I say heating as a service, I'm mostly talking about things that you could run as a commercial enterprise. So these are commercial applications. You could run a business doing it. Um, Now, heating at home, it's a much smaller scale, different considerations in terms of what you do with the heat when you don't need it. Do you dump it? Do you keep mining? Um, but it lends itself to a productized solution. So it's still got a commercial, certainly commercial opportunity, but more so as, from a product perspective. And I don't want to dive too much into this specific category because um, we might have a couple people talking about it in a bit. So I don't want to say anything that's gonna get covered or whatever. Um, so you can certainly do it. I think do it for yourself. You might as well. If you want to be mining and you already have the heat, you should be doing it. Yeah.
We could all, but but it is that when you view it, so at least larger than imagine so that or to solve the work energy question. That's about a mine operation. It's not as much of a problem that miners are solve. Does all versus trying to draw one. That is most easy.
Yeah, you don't have to do anything too radical, and you've got staff on site. So it's a very different proposition, I think.
Is there any in the commercial scale different time where it's as is more traditional?
Yeah, I think there's opportunity for that for sure, because I don't see why you couldn't oversize these systems, especially if there's, if the grid operator has like a demand response program, why could you not participate in that? Oversize your mine, give heat when you need heat, as long as there's somewhere to dump it, as long as you've got the ability to shut down if you need it. So a dry cooler somewhere, and then, just ramp down. What do you get paid to ramp down? I think there's definitely a business model for that. Sort of like step two after you get your foot in the door, kind of thing. Yeah, that's sort of how I see it.
Say the Skybird stage only in these applications, these shows. Where sessions available.
I know of 6 to 8 in Finland with like a pipeline of almost 100 megawatts in Finland serving district heating systems. That seems to be like ground zero for it. They've picked it up, they're running with it. Other people have stuff to learn. So it'll spread. They've got kind of a unique scenario. They've got very clean power, mostly from nuclear. Most of these older legacy systems are burning like peat and like filthy stuff. So they're trying to stop doing that, and they're incentivized to use electricity. That's it might even be like a national mandate. Um, but then there's and those are probably the biggest ones. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bunch in Russia and China that we don't know about because they're not on X talking about it. Um, but they have, I mean, they have, from what I understand, they have thousands and thousands and thousands of district heating systems themselves. And I don't know, there are people who, um, I think, close to the industry who say that a lot of miners are going to Russia, like mining machines. So I don't know what's happening with them. It would not surprise me that if, there's lots of these things happen. Like it's pretty obvious, right? It's an obvious thing to do with it. It's just challenging to to implement in a way. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's tons we don't know about, but there's lots that, um, are in North America that, there's a couple spas in New York, um, or one plus one another being built. There's a small district heating system in North Vancouver that's being served. The base oil is being served by miners, and now they're trying to convince the city. There's kind of a big municipal debate about heating one of their pools, like a massive pool. It's an outdoor pool, so it would be it'd really lengthen the season. It would be great for a number of reasons, but it's just one of those hot button topics. Um, and then yeah, there was a guy building furnaces. Like commercial scale furnaces in Labrador in Canada. Who's, he's heating a skeel, he's heating, I don't know what else, a bunch of stuff, but he doesn't really talk about it much, but it's, it's there. There are, certainly projects happening and tons of projects happening on a smaller scale. Um, so yeah, I mean, it hasn't, it's been years now and it's not going away. I think it's growing. I think the use case is obvious. And I think, as mining gets more and more competitive, especially after the next halving, it's going to be one of those things that might be necessary for survival, right? Like, you know, have some kind of predictable revenue stream that's uncorrelated to hash price. That would be nice, wouldn't it? So I think it only makes sense. Yes, sir. Yeah. Oh, no way. But I couldn't know many Udemix. Ready? Go. I'll end up next. No, not really. I'm early on my outreach to some of these organizations. I mean, I almost had there's a mega spa development in Toronto where I'm from that's like absolutely massive. Um that was, considering it. It would make a lot of sense for them, but they're I don't know, they're spending hundreds of millions on this facility that's basically like an indoor tropical environment with hot pools the size of, a football stadium kind of thing. It's pretty wild. So that would be my dream application, but no. Post-secondary, well, post-secondary it's a good market because almost every university has a decarbonization strategy. They're trying to electrify as much as possible. Burn less. But at the same time, you have to sort of fit in. Uh Not everybody's open-minded to it. I think that's kind of the biggest challenge. Anybody else want to get in the game? Yeah. I missed the first part. Oh, you just introduce yourself one more time. So I'm an independent consultant. Uh, was working in sort of the energy industry on the demand side and all kinds of, like, basically for a large global engineering consulting firm. But now I'm on my own and serving either those clients to help them understand this, or I'm also working for Bitcoin miners to help them understand this, like the waste heat offtake market, right? Um, the first thing that pops to mind is like greenhouses or whatever. There's certain obvious things that come to mind, but um, not all that stuff makes a ton of sense necessarily. Depends on how you're coming at it. Are you a publicly listed miner? Are you for profit miner? Are you an enthusiast? Like there's kind of a range of motivations that need to sort of match the range of motivations on the heat off-taker side. Um, so yeah, I'm just solo me, Matt Carlsson.
Would you say your ideal client would be here to anybody? You mentioned Fingler, which is great. We don't have a lot.
Like for off-taker?
Yeah, that would be interested in what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think all these kind of industries. I think all these industries. Yeah, I mean, all of these district heating systems. Like these are just sort of the most obvious. There's lots more, and I'm not an expert in every single industrial process. There's thousands of them, right? I mean, maybe you're making ethanol in corn country, and there's a perfect application there. I don't know, and that's for somebody to figure out, though.
It's a large market.
Yeah, it's a large market. So is this. So is, there's all kinds of them, all kinds of them. Um, so that's why I say, people are coming from all walks of life and in, different types of jobs, different responsibilities in different industries. And I just sort of wanted to frame it generically so you could kind of take that away and think like, oh yeah, actually, you know what? I could probably use that here. That kind of thing. That's all I got. Thanks.